My name is Hank Emerson, and I'm one of the organizers of this event. Okay, I called this event today because I believe that there's a crisis of hope in this country, a feeling on the part of many average citizens that their voices don't matter and that their actions don't have the power to influence events. At a time when wealthy corporations, well-paid lobbyists, and wealthy campaign donors wield immense power, it is understandable that average citizens feel they have no real power. Hand in hand with this feeling of powerless comes strong feelings of anger and fear that so many of us have struggled with over the past 5 years. There are real events, real problems, which ignite this anger and fear. But it is my opinion we need to focus more on hope. If we feel we have no power, sure enough, it becomes true. If we decide we do have power, sure enough, it becomes true. Either way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The purpose of this evening is to stir the precious embers of hope into a mighty fire and to recognize that we need each other. I'll repeat that. We need each other to ignite hope and sustain hope. Working together, we increase our power. Being together, we ignite hope and sustain hope. So I'm going to ask everybody I know it's probably difficult for a lot of us. Let's go back in our minds to January 6th. And I'm going to ask everyone to observe about 2 minutes of silence for the people who died on that day, and also for all the people in that building who will carry the scars of that day for the rest of their lives. Let's have a few minutes of silence, please. All right, just a quick note about our program. We begin, it's sort of a two-part program. The first part of the program is six speakers who've prepared remarks, and that will be followed by my friend Jen Elam, who will read a piece of creative writing. And then in the spirit of a genuine democracy, we'll go to an open mic, and we're going to have a two-way conversation with our audience. We've called this evening an evening of hope, and we hope to proceed in a spirit of hope, but when it comes to the open mic, we are going to be practicing genuine freedom of speech, and you have the right to say anything you like. So my first introduction, this is comparable to a rookie baseball player who's in the position of introducing a 20-year veteran who everyone knows is bound for the Hall of Fame. And that man is named Terry Rumsey. So as you can hear, a lot of people know Terry. Terry's got a lot of friends. His wife, Robin, is here as well. Just a few words about Terry. Terry is a very seasoned, highly skilled, and deeply committed activist. Over many years, he has shown the courage to care, the ability to organize, and the will to fight. Please give Terry a warm welcome.
Thank you, Hank, and thank you for organizing the Evening of Hope. So when Hank contacted me and asked me to tell a story connected to my own experience with activism and community organizing about some story that inspired hope, I said, well, be careful there, because I've been active since age 17. I'm 67 now. That's 50 years of stories. But I got the distinct impression that he wanted me to whittle it down to one. So I decided to tie it to the very issue that we're standing out here tonight for, and also to this actual building that we're standing in front of. Before I tell my story, I have to do a little context and rewind the clock back to 1920. There was a guy named John J. McClure, who was from the city of Chester, which is my hometown, and he was an evil political genius who built a political machine that stands in history with the Boss Tweed machine of New York City and Richard Daley's machine of Chicago. But the political machine of Chester, Pennsylvania, which eventually grew to all of Delaware County, that John J. McClure built, was one of the most corrupt machines in the history of the United States. It used bribery and patronage and ultimately, if necessary, violence to control the people of Chester and the people of Delaware County. So fast forward to 1984, I was 30 years old, and I got together with an activist from Chester named Murdy Gilmore and one from media named Deborah Rubin. And we decided to do a voter registration movement in the city of Chester. We called it Project Vote, Voter Organization, Training, and Education. We didn't know much, but in those days, you couldn't register to vote online, right? You had to come to this building here, actually on the other side. It's connected, the government center, and pick up voter registration forms, actual physical cards for you young people, believe it or not. And they told us that we could get 100 cards at a time for any one group. Now, we were young folks and we thought we were going to register 5,000 voters, so we said this could be interesting. But anyway, it's 1984, it's about May. We started in January. We were doing this thing of registering 100 voters. We'd have to bring the cards back, and then we'd get 100 more. And we had registered about 500 people, and we started thinking, we may not get to 5,000 at this pace. So we decided to have a day where we would register 500 folks in Chester in a single day. Swarthmore College students like Robin were still around, and we had folks from community groups in Chester, unions, women's groups, and so we thought we could do this. So we come to the courthouse, to the Voter Registration Bureau, and say, we need 500 cards this time. Nope, that's absolutely not. We can't waste the voter registration forms on registering people to vote, oddly enough. We went to our county council, nope, not going to change the policy. So we're really trying to figure out how we can register 500 voters with only 100 forms. And we decided that we would get our coalition together, and we got the president of the AFL-CIO, and we got the president of the Chester NAACP, and many church groups, community groups, women's groups, and they came with us. We called the media. We had the cameras there, and the Delaware County Daily Times in a different era, and the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we came up and said, Project Vote would like to have 500 cards. And absolutely not. We told you, Mr. Rumsey. And so each member of each group came and said, we would like 100 voter registration cards for our union. We'd like it for our church. So they handed them, and then they came over and handed it to the Project Vote folks. And they started dawning on them that wow, I guess we have a really stupid policy if it's this easy to overcome. And we got 1,000 voter registration cards that day. And we did register our 500 people, and then we actually went on by the end of the year to register 13,000 people, not just in Chester. We ended up going out to Darby and Darby Township and stuff. We didn't stop registering voters, and in 1991, we elected the first Democratic majority since the Civil War in Chester. It was the first African-American Democratic woman to be elected mayor. And while, you know, obviously there's still many problems in the city of Chester, when we began, less than 1 in 3 of the eligible voters in the city were registered to vote. That's comparable to Jim Crow states before the Voting Rights Act. And now over 75% of the eligible voters of Chester are registered to vote. Fast forward from 91 to just where we are today, and a progressive Democratic council controls our government in Delaware County for the first time since the Civil War. So the message is that nonviolent people's movements can create hope, can create change. And we've all been a part of these kind of movements. If we're looking to the answer to defending and expanding our democracy, just look around here tonight, because we are the answer.
Thank you so much, Terry. Just a wonderful example of people organizing and the truth that our actions can make a difference. My second speaker is someone who's a part of my meeting. It's Swarthmore Friends meeting, and her name is Sue Edwards. Sue Edwards is, yeah, let's hear a hand for Sue. Sue is one of the most kind people that I know, and I found her to be just a very consistent person over many years, and I'm grateful that I know her. And I'm grateful that my meeting has people like Sue. Like Terry, Sue has had the courage to hope, the will to act, the ability to organize. Sue, please come up, and can we please have a round for Sue Edwards?
Actually, my story goes back 50 years also. I want to tell you a story about 1971 when I was in my 20s and living in Philadelphia. A cluster of us were just in the process of coming together in West Philly to create a community called the Life Center to work together for a just society. At that exact moment, we learned of a terrible violation of human rights going on in Pakistan. The people of what was then East Pakistan had had a plebiscite in which they had voted overwhelmingly to separate from West Pakistan and form a new nation, which is now called Bangladesh. But the Pakistani government, with military and other aid from the US, was determined to stop them, raping and killing and starving thousands of people to make them submit to their rule. They tried to ignore the clear results of that election. Sound familiar? Yeah. Activists in the newly created Life Center wanted to make a stand and get our government out of the business of arming such brutality. We learned that shipments of arms bound for Pakistan were leaving from Philadelphia ports. What to do? Someone suggested, in jest, mining the harbor. But that led someone else to say, what if we took a flotilla of small boats and blocked those freighters? That idea caught fire, and a movement that lasted for months was born, eventually successfully getting the US government out of the business of arming the Pakistani dictator. Yay, that was fabulous. What were the elements of that campaign that made it successful? Dick Taylor, who still lives in Philadelphia. Anybody else know Dick Taylor? Yeah, cool guy. He wrote a book about it a few years later called Blockade. It's a page turner, and it's available on Amazon, I discovered. It was written in 1977. Here are some of the factors that made the difference. Courage, facing scare tactics, intimidation, and plain old fear of doing new things. Creativity, the crazy notion that tiny canoes could actually stop a gigantic freighter. Conviction in the rightness of our cause and creating a clear picture of an injustice. Camaraderie and community. Guidance from seasoned civil rights activists. Self-education and research. Successful outreach to the Longshoremen's Union. Bengali involvement and leadership. Good press work and continually upping the story to generate new interest. Outreach to congressional members and their staff. Picketing offices of shipping companies with help from a 40-foot mural created for that, so we add creativity to that list. Sacrifice. I and others fasted for 10 days in front of the White House to shine a light on the starvation of Bengali refugees. Increasingly, when a ship failed to show up when expected, some reporters said we had failed, but we countered that we had scared them away. And when that happened, the little boats decided to go on maneuvers in the harbor to get used to the currents and the tides. Police tried to scare our boat paddlers, saying they were risking their lives and could get sucked under the ship's rotors. Boaters became more determined than ever and made quick decisions that they were willing to take that risk. Many longshoremen who stood to lose a day's pay if we stopped a ship from docking nevertheless honored our picketing. And even when we weren't able to stop a particular ship, we created a movement with coverage in the national media that influenced Congress and helped to change national policy. Today, I choose to be hopeful because I have seen human beings rise to occasions in spite of humanity's lapses into the worst possibilities. I believe it is our mission, our destiny as humans, to act, to create a world that works for everyone. Can you imagine that? A world that works for everyone. We humans do have a tendency to not be able to see our own power to change the world. But a look at Greta Thunberg should dispel that. And the world is different because you are in it. That's why that arc of the moral universe does actually bend toward justice. But I think only because we can count on at least some people to risk their well-being to stand up for what will make the world a better place. And big changes have been made. People mostly don't believe anymore in the divine right of kings, and chattel slavery is mostly a thing of the past. Governments no longer draw and quarter people, thank goodness. So as bad as things sometimes seem, they have been worse. I'd like to close by recommending a few books to anyone who is thinking of exploring ways you can be a more powerful world changer. Blockade by Richard K. Taylor, Doing Democracy by Bill Moyer and others, How We Win by George Lakey, and one of my favorites, Active Hope by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. Thank you.
Something I forgot to mention is that there are a couple people who've worked closely with me to organize this event, and I want to recognize them all. Terry Rumsey has been with me step by step with all the most difficult decisions. Thank you, Terry. Sue Edwards has worked closely with me. She's been invaluable. And my next speaker is Paul Green, and Paul has just been terrific. Paul is a good friend of mine. He inspires me. He inspires me with the depth of his thoughtfulness about this country and the depth of his caring about this country. I'm always so interested in what he has to say. He has a background that not everybody has as part of his job as a teacher, a professor. He's traveled to many, many different countries, and that has helped to give him a very interesting perspective on the problems here. Paul, please come up, and everyone, please give Paul Green a warm welcome.
What happens when democracy fails? We don't have to theorize about the many ways democracy can fail. We can see some of the things that have already happened to vibrant democracies around the world. In Cambodia of the late 20th century, democracy gave way to the extremist Khmer Rouge and then to two competing prime ministers. Economic development in Cambodia was stunted for decades because of long-term uncertainty and power struggles, and Cambodians struggled with poverty. In Guatemala, breakdowns of democratic processes resulted in garbage on the streets not collected for months. This in turn led to a healthcare crisis on top of a political crisis. Paramilitary groups are encouraged and bolstered, and often inflicting widespread violence. Tim Snyder of Yale is one of the many reputable historians who've studied what happens when democracies fail. He writes, "The European history of the 20th century shows us that societies can break, democracies can fall, ethics can collapse, and ordinary people can find themselves standing over death pits with guns in their hands." I want to share my personal experiences with watching democracy falter in the country of Nepal, next door to India. Nepal had a parliamentary democracy, modeled on the British parliamentary system. When I first visited Nepal, it was a free democratic society with a vibrant economy. It was a haven for backpackers and anyone interested in climbing the Himalayas or Mount Everest. Unfortunately, democracy broke down as one of the political parties left politics and formed a violent insurgency. I returned to Nepal summer after summer in the early 2000s, and each time I returned, I found things to be getting worse and worse. Military checkpoints appeared throughout the Kathmandu Valley. The government was checking its citizens for bombs because insurgents would occasionally strike power stations or other targets. The extremists gained more and more control over the country, and entire regions became effectively their domain. Going through daily life meant being aware that one moved into and out of regions within Nepal that were controlled by either the government or the extremists. As we were driving by motorcycle in the area of the Great Swambhu Buddhist Shrine, my friend and guide Samser told me, "Right now there are guns on us." We had entered a part of the city that it was effectively not under government control, and he was alerting me that we'd better not make any sudden or unexpected moves. Every so often, extremists would call a citywide strike. When this happened, all work, all education, all activities stopped in the entire city. The extremists would bring the entire country's economy to a standstill, and they had their people everywhere so that anyone who defied the strike would be seen, whether it was in the form of work or merely making a public appearance. And there would be personal retaliation, a brick through your window, personal injury, a smashed car, or worse. There was fear everywhere, an uneasy awareness that extremists were always watching you. No one was really free. No one was safe. There was just this continual anxiety. The country subsequently melted down into a full-scale civil war, costing tens of thousands of lives. Instead of building their dreams, my Nepali friends were focused on just staying alive, just getting by. Another great casualty of the loss of democracy is the repurposing of government institutions. In a democracy, it is understood that government institutions are there to serve the people, and when they don't, one can pursue accountability by voting. It's not perfect, but there is accountability. Once democracy fails and authoritarianism rises, then the purpose of these institutions becomes to serve the government or to serve its leader, not so much to serve the people. Corrupt government officials take advantage of a situation, begin to demand bribes in order to provide the kinds of services they were actually hired to provide. Although insurrectionists may feel they are gaining power, history shows that what actually tends to happen is that the institutions of government become less accountable to the people. Loss of democracy leads to powerlessness. Right now, there are many Americans who seem willing to end our democracy, and history tells us that many of these Americans know our democracy is under attack, and they're going along with it anyway. Why? Because they feel it serves them in some way, because perhaps it advances some heartfelt, specific political wishes, and most importantly, because they don't realize where this can be going. It's not too late for Americans who can see what is going on to stop it. History also shows that if we lose our democracy, if we undermine or distort our elections, we may never recover. Democratic elections don't sort of just come back automatically after some time. Powerful leaders and institutions don't voluntarily give up power or voluntarily begin to hold themselves accountable to the people. If we destroy our democracy, if we smash down the beautiful house of the United States of America, we will not simply find ourselves living in a new and different mansion. We will find ourselves in a pile of rubble. If we lose our democracy, we lose our ability to steer our country, to live freely, to pursue our dreams, and we also lose our ability to handle any of the country's pressing problems and challenges such as poverty, education, equity, and healthcare. The stakes really couldn't be higher. We have so much to gain through democratic cooperation. Let's have a republic, and let's keep it.
All right, that's Paul Green. I told you he was a very thoughtful person, and Paul, you did not disappoint. That was just terrific. My next speaker is another friend, another Paul. I seem to have a lot of friends named Paul. I consider his wife Fran a friend as well. Before I introduce Paul, I just want to mention that one of my hopes for the people who really love what I will call genuine democracy and feel it's something worth fighting for, that we will begin to look on each other more as a community. And one of the things a community can do is share resources. For example, we don't all have minds that grasp a complex piece of legislation, but within our communities, there are people that do. We don't all have the skill to organize. Within our communities, there are people who do, that kind of thing. So I'm going to introduce my friend, Paul Sheldon, who I believe does have the kind of mind that can grasp a piece of complex legislation. Paul, please come up, and everyone, please give Paul Sheldon a very warm welcome. Paul, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Hank. We are here today to commemorate a violent attempt to overthrow the electoral process that is essential to the continued democracy of our country. But January 6, 2021 was not the only attempt to subvert and overthrow our electoral system. There is a history here that continues to this present day. There has been an ongoing process to restrict or control. It's always 3 and then it stops. There has been an ongoing process to restrict or control the ability of citizens to effectively vote for the candidates of their choice. This subversion has been accomplished by states and counties, making it more difficult for citizens to vote by doing such things as limiting the number of polling places, restricting the times of voting, imposing unnecessarily stringent qualifications for establishing residency, and a host of similar impositions, as we heard from Terry earlier. Now, the purpose of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which is right now in Congress, is to enable Congress to fulfill its constitutional duties as written in Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, as follows. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time, by law, make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would restore and strengthen parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that were severely gutted by a 2013 Supreme Court decision in Shelby versus Holder that left individual states free to basically do whatever they dared by setting their own voting standards. The Supreme Court decision took issue with the formulas that were then in use by Congress to identify states and counties that had voting restrictions that imposed voting impediments on those with minority status and such things as race, language, and gender orientation. However, at that time, the Supreme Court explicitly invited Congress to revisit the 1965 Voting Rights Act because conditions in the covered jurisdictions had changed over 50 years. I quote what the court said: "We issue no holding on the law itself, only the coverage formula." So there you go. This is just what the John Lewis Voting Rights Act now in Congress would address. This bill has passed the House of Representatives. However, it's currently stalled in the Senate, where it is at this time primarily a partisan issue of Republicans versus Democrats. You can readily learn much more about all this online. There's a lot you can learn online about it, particular senators involved and so on. I'm keeping within 5 minutes so you can find more details. It appears to be coming to a head about the time of the Martin Luther King commemoration. I think that's when it's really going to be, something's going to happen. So it is urgent that Congress pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would restore and update the formulas under which jurisdictions with a history of voter discrimination need federal clearance for any attempts to add any new restrictions. For them to, any jurisdictions with a history of voter discrimination would have to get federal clearance before they could go forward. Anything less, doing anything less, returns this country to a shameful past. Thank you.
Voting Rights Act, and I talked to Paul before we started, and I just asked him, Paul, is this overall a worthwhile act? And he said, yes, it is. So in the very outside chance that a member of Congress is watching or will watch, I'm going to say, stop your endless bickering, pass this bill. All right. So my next speaker is a beloved friend. She's unique. I know no one else quite like Joan. She's opinionated. She's tremendously bright. She's passionate. Joan, I admire the thought that you give to things. So I want to introduce my friend, Joan Broadfield. Joan, please come on up. Let's welcome Joan.
Thank you, Hank. Wow, look at us. Look at us. Wow. We remember the heartache a year ago, don't we? And we're gathered here to hope, for real. And we are bringing our hope. Think about that. Think about the hope you're bringing. Hope is brought by refugees. They come here with hope. I've been thinking about the hope that enslaved people have had, sometimes buried for generations. But then it appears. In my community, there are a couple of young people that just amaze me. So keep watching people in Chester. Carol Kazim, Kearney Warren, keep an eye on them. Chaos does happen, even in a democracy. And we get through it. Don't be scared of it. Fear is the thing that really, really, really can devastate us. So I have a practice of non-anxious presence that's been helped a lot by a member of the friends in my yearly meeting named O. And what she has us do at times of stress is to breathe. So I invite you all, take a deep breath and let it out slowly. That can help your grounding. It's a great exercise. So we get over fear by carrying hope, don't we? Or we can. But sometimes we get stuck in the heartache. Well, I heard from someone the other day who said, yeah, we have heartache, but we also have joy. So think about your joy for a minute. What is it that brings you joy? The other thing she said is, okay, take your joy, be curious about your heartache. Now, what is it about your joy that you might put in service of doing something about your heartache? When Ed passed away in 2010, very suddenly, my partner in life, I was devastated, as you can imagine. So what was I going to do? Well, I was retired. I could find out more about the city I live in. I could make friends. I could be active. My joy is people, as some of you may know. So I've used that by meeting people, and during a pandemic, I've been part of a group that is looking at police accountability. I've been part of a group that is looking at incarceration in our county and changing the way the prison works. Thank you, Susan. And I've been looking at the people in my city who are running for office, because even though the party that I hoped would solve everything is really stuck, in part because of McClure, a large part of that is internalized oppression. But the young people are with it, so keep watching them. I'm very excited. So here we are, bringing our joy with Hank, who decided the heartache needed an answer, and we are the answer, right? Yeah. Thank you, Hank.
Thank you so much, John. I found that very beautiful and very poetic. My next speaker is a blessing in my life. She's a dear friend. Something that I love about Jen is she doesn't just talk the talk with creativity, she walks the walk. How should I say this? With her, the creativity is not something that gets worked around everything else. Everything else gets worked around the creativity. Jen's from Kentucky. You know that by her accent. As she has told me more than once, as soon as people hear me speak, I lose 50 IQ points. But Jen, just let me say, I love you and I love your accent. Come on up, share what you have.
Woo! Heartache and joy. I've been living the extremes of those for the past 7 months. I got caught in the crossfires of a conflict, and I didn't have a concept of what happened to me. I didn't even plan to talk about this, but you brought it out of me, you guys. Every speaker so far is somebody I've known for years. Every single one has blessed me in so many ways I can't even tell you. 2 years ago, I found myself need to move back to Kentucky, where I'm from. And then 3 weeks ago, I found myself saying, if I don't get in my car right now and go to Pennsylvania, I'm gonna die. I cannot stay away one more day. And look at all these people that showed up tonight. I know almost everybody here from years. I lived here 25 years and know so many people here from those years. So blessed to be here. I don't know if I can read in this light, but I'm going to give it a try. Possibilities for 2022. Liquid light with love brings possibilities. I love that word, possibilities. 2021 was a very hard year for many of us, the hardest of my life. I gave up the word impossible for my New Year's resolution last year. Things I thought impossible in both directions happened. Heartache and joy. Many have retreated into their boxes, and that's very understandable. We feel we must care for only ourselves, immediate families, communities, and the polarization grows as more become the other to keep away. A prayer came to me as I worshiped in the new year. This year, a physicist introduced me to the concept of liquid light, and I became fascinated with it as a spiritual concept. My prayer became, may our creeds and relationships that have become like stone be opened, cracked open, to allow the liquid light carrying love to enter in. May 2022 bring liquid love to our relationships, and may they flow. May the braver angels within ourselves rise to meet the others in our lives, overcoming the inequalities, accusations, and traumas of 2021 on all sides of the divides. I have sometimes been called a dark blooming flower, traumas eventually bringing joys throughout my life. May the sacred darkness as well as light bring us as God's flowers, love with action to heal and blossom in 2022. The personal becomes the universal. The universal becomes the personal in ways that all survive and thrive. I've worked in social justice my whole life and lived it as best I could. And then in 2017, a new place of social justice appeared before me when J.D. Vance wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. I learned I was a hillbilly when I was 12 years old, and my family traveled the Hillbilly Highway from Kentucky up to Chicago to be able to make a living. I've traveled back and forth on that Hillbilly Highway my whole life. The conflict I got caught in 7 months ago is the most intense example of oppression, discrimination toward Appalachian people I have ever witnessed, and I have done a lot of it because Hank was not just making a joke about us losing 50 IQ points as soon as I opened my damn mouth. My dang mouth. I'm so happy to be here. I can't even express it in words. Thank you, Hank.
All right. Well, I'm so grateful for all the thought and the creativity that our speakers have put into their talks today. I just want to read some thoughts for you. They're mostly about the state of our democracy. And my concerns, I guess, I think if there's a theme, it's my concerns about the things that could hold us back. The things that could hold us back from realizing our best power. My job is helping a 100-year-old man to continue living in his own home. It's a satisfying job, but it's also very sobering. Makes me very aware of limits and the power of nature. We will all be like Jay someday. We will all reach the end of our years. When we do, we will have to look back. We will have to look back at the choices we made and the things we did. My question tonight is, how will we remember the choices we made during this difficult time? How will our children remember? How will history remember us? Let it not be said of us that we vented and vented, raged and raged, worried and worried, but in the end, did nothing. We can be better than that. Let it be said of us that we acted boldly, thoughtfully, creatively, strategically. Let it not be said of us that we failed to grasp the historical moment we are in. Instead, let it be said of us that we grasp the moment. We realize that our democracy is in peril. Let it be said that we responded to the moment with our strongest love, our deepest commitment, our greatest wisdom, our most inspired creativity. Let it not be said of us that we became consumed by our own anger. It is natural to feel angry when we see someone hurting a country we love. It is human to want to retaliate when we are feeling abused. It is understandable to feel hatred for a cruel, egocentric, deeply dishonest leader. I get it. I felt those feelings too. But my feeling is, if we respond to anger with anger, hatred with hatred, personal attack with personal attack, we will degrade ourselves and our cause. In my opinion, we will also lose. It will be better to think strategically, better to be motivated by love. Let it not be said of us that we were so dispirited, so disheartened by events, so intimidated by the difficulty of the task before us, that we turned away from hope. Let it be said of us that we dared to hope. We dared to believe our actions could make a difference. We dared to imagine a better America. Let it not be said of us that we were so mired in American individualism, so entangled in our own personal egos, that we were unable to act collectively in any powerful, effective way. It is my belief that if we are going to have a genuine democracy, if we are going to save our country from leaders who want to be a law unto themselves, we must learn to work together. It will be tremendously hard to do this, but it is also hard to watch important parts of our country get worse and worse. Hard to watch leaders get elected who don't want genuine democracy. Hard to be a parent staring at the ceiling at night, deeply worried about the type of country your children will inherit. If we lack the skills to work together, we must learn them. If we lack the stamina to do it, we must develop it. If we lack the will and the courage, we must find it. Let it be said of us that we work together with patience, tenacity, and courage. As I get toward the end of my talk, I want to talk about something which is difficult for many of us, and this makes me sad, but it is difficult for us, and it's love of country. I think most of us understand our country has made terrible mistakes, caused terrible harm to whole groups of people. But let's think about other love in our lives. We love our partners knowing their flaws. We love our children knowing their flaws. We love our friends knowing their flaws. Can we choose to love a deeply flawed country? Because this country is our home. This country is our home, and it is our children's home. This beautiful, terrible, hopeful, cynical, loving, hateful, creative, destructive, bitter, divided, evolving place, it is our home. It is our children's home. It is the place where most of them will live out their lives. And I believe it's a home worth fighting for. We do not live in normal times. Donald Trump is not a normal opponent. The state of our democracy is not normal. We cannot do what we have always done and expect to get a good outcome, and we cannot wait. The situation is dire, the need for action is profound and compelling, and the time is now. Let's get started, let's get to work.
Okay, thank you very much, Hank. How about a round of applause for Hank, who has really more than anyone else seen this through, dreamed it up, lived this moment. Thank you, Hank. I've been asked to facilitate the Democratic part of this meeting. Okay, so first I'd like to call on Rich Schiffer to say a few words from here. Thanks, Paul.
I'm here because Hank invited me. A few days ago, he asked me to come and present a poem that hadn't yet been written. So I put some thought to it. So this is called Hope and Anguish. These stone steps resound with the footsteps and hopes of all those who have ascended them. These grand pillars stand testament to the virtues our country was erected upon. These walls have witnessed the triumphs of democracy over oppression. This building, like so many others across our nation, embodies the vision of our ancestors. There are those who would see that vision fade. There are those who would prefer to manipulate democracy to maintain their power. There are those who lash out against the very virtues they have benefited from. There are those who have forgotten what it means to have hope. What fills the heart that has lost all hope? What then spreads through the veins and motivates action? Burning anguish that spreads like a dark cancer across the soul of society. Igniting fear and outrage, anguish lashes out at all perceived threats, real or imagined. How do we excise the anguish and restore the vibrant community of our shared ideals? We seek the cause, the greed that undermines the body, and treat it as the deep wound that it is. The hope that lies within the marrow of our being has power to defeat anguish if we share it. We mourn the lost, we stitch the wounds, we transfuse with new blood. We come together, we forgive. With hope, we, the people, heal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. Okay, I see a hand up from more recent Patricia Eldridge. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, what I'm going to do is hold the microphone near the device, and we'll see if we can't get your sound brought out here.
Yes, thank you very much. And
can you all hear?
I can be heard. I had written in a voluntary moment to read a poem of Langston Hughes, which I would very much like to do, and recognizing our flawed human selves, I also recognize that we all have within us a better self, which we must continue to empower to get our work done. And I think we will do that. This poem is called I Dream a World, and it's by Langston Hughes. I dream a world where man, no other man, will scorn, where love will bless the earth, and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. A world, I dream, where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maurice.
A number of cultures have a myth. I think of it as a bit of a nightmare when you're north of the equator of eternal winter. Glistening food, bigger deal if you don't have shelter. The ill omen of the current moment. The ill omen of the current moment seems more a drizzling, hacking rain than a snowy death. Keep thinking of plague and how much that dripping rain on the window panes sounds like a death rattle. other times, I think about another not-so-ordinary night near the equator, where a pregnant teenage girl had the rather unordinary news of the current monarch wanted her son dead and was willing to murder the vast majority of the area's firstborn in the hope that one of them would be them to secure power. Twelfth night, Magi. Aside from goodwill, peace and goodwill to men, it's a flight to Egypt is a politically fraught, dangerous situation to be in, especially if you have the cloud of pregnant teenage girl and carpenter of a minority in the Roman Empire. Hope. Also check.
Thank you, Lucy.
I am Lucy, protest mentee of Sue Edwards.
Protest mentee Sue Edwards. All right. We have another speaker coming up. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Very much. I'm Skip Shuda, and want to thank you all for coming out tonight for this important conversation. Thanks for making this happen. I wrote a prayer for January 6th, and I felt like I wanted to write something, and so I appreciate the opportunity to share this. Universal Father, ever-present Mother, collective wisdom of our highest selves, I thank you for the grace bestowed upon our family in this experiment of humankind. When we declared the self-evident truths of men created equally, endowed with rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and founded our country on that promise. I thank you for the abolition of the stain of slavery and for healing our country after the terrible fight. I thank you for the progress of civil liberty for men and women, for our unbending commitment to allowing all truths to be spoken. Our country was born of three masters: the judicial heart, the legislative mind, and the executive torso, set in tension so that none would rise above the other. And for over 228 years, we have peacefully transitioned to new governments. Thank you for this blessing. On this day, we are reminded that our republic is a precious and fragile agreement. We pray that humanity's great experiment to grant the will of the people will continue. Please deliver us from forces that would lay waste to the votes of any citizen. Deliver us from complacency and ignorance. Provide us with the light of factual information, credible experts, and impartial information sources. Knowledge can light us up, and misinformation can corrupt our spirit. Please help us find our voice in the face of corruption and hatred. If tyranny is alive, silence is indeed violence. May our children and the generations beyond find a world where we decided to invest in our people over corporations, in the spirit of the executive, legislative, and judicial. Amen.
Thank you. I just wanted to make an observation and a suggestion. People might be interested in what sort of actions we can take. I wanted to, there's a lot of people responsible for the insurrection that, there's nothing we can do about it, but there is one actor, namely ExxonMobil, which is a huge sponsor of the senators and representatives who refused to sanction Biden's win. They're also a huge donor to Joe Manchin, who's a critical linchpin in preventing majority rule through the filibuster. And a lot of companies after the insurrection, said that they would reevaluate their donations. Exxon did that too, but they've since resumed donating to the so-called Sedition Caucus. And so my suggestion is we all have a choice when we fuel our tanks as to what gas station we go to. And I ask that you boycott ExxonMobil stations in favor of other ones which are not trying to destroy our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're having a few technology glitches. Yeah, Kat.
Yeah, this is not a specific Democratic Party thing in any way, but I just received, coincidentally, an email from the Pennsylvania Dems about things we can do, so I would love to share that link with people. It's very simple. Again, this is not sponsored in any way, just happened to come into my email, and if you consider yourself a Democrat and want to find things to do, it is mobilize.us, and then look for PA Dems. I just did PA Democratic Party and then mobilize. Now, I know it's an organization that I don't necessarily endorse, but if you want to take action, that's one way that you might look into. And there are other ways to look online and say, I know that I live in Upper Chichester, we have a teeny tiny Democratic Party, but the last 3 years I've been going to the polls and I've been standing in line, the only person handing out Democratic literature. There are small steps that you can take. There are bigger steps like registering to vote. Find something online, get involved. I'm not endorsing that particular group, it's just one way. It just happened to come into my email when I was double checking things.
Thank you very much, Kat. Okay. Anyone else?
Just sort of following up on that. This year, I was able to help a neighbor of mine become the only person of color on the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District Board. It was surprisingly easy. We know that a lot of the people that were present on January 6th are now seeking office either on the election boards or on school boards. Because those are elections that don't take a lot of numbers to win, they are easy to both win but also easy to block. So I would urge everybody to pay attention to your local elected officials at whatever level you can and be instrumental, because that is happening here in Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Barb. It seems like the leading trend in the 20th and 21st century is that when democracies end, it's because the people voted it out, gave away their democracy. And this would be a way that could happen. Might there be anyone else, either online or here, that would have something that you'd like to share?
One last thing I want to say to everybody, because I think there's strengths that lie within us that we don't necessarily recognize. And as a lifelong educator, I have discovered that modeling is the most powerful tool of teaching, that we have to live out the words we speak. We have to put our actions and our hearts into place of the words we speak. Modeling is the most powerful tool of teaching and guiding others into activity.
Thank you. you very much, Maurice Eldridge from Swarthmore College.
All right, so I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm new to organizing. I'd never done it before. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much for showing up in person. I think that it really shows commitment to come out on a cold winter day in the middle of a COVID wave. I think you are the hardcore of the hardcore. Give yourselves a hand, please. Everybody online, I'm so grateful. I saw so many friends and so many familiar faces, and I'm grateful for that too. And let's end with some poetry, and then we'll play a song by the great Ray Charles. First is just one stanza of a poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley. It speaks to the issue of people having power. Rise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. Lastly, a quote from George Bernard Shaw, which Robert Kennedy would often cite. Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? Thank you so much for being here.